Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and got a really fun episode today. Just wanted to mention that this is a great time to subscribe to RotoWire. Got a ton of prospect outlooks up on the site, working on my top 400 update to the prospect rankings, which will be live a week from today. So definitely subscribe to the site if you haven't already. But today's guest is KC Bubba, my buddy Brian Entrekin, and we're going to go through all 30 teams and talk about some potential undervalued players or overvalued players. We're going to be referencing Roster Resource quite a bit, which is a great product. It's a free product over on Fangraphs, which is why we're referencing it, because so many drafters look at the depth charts on Roster Resource. So if we see something on there that we don't agree with, that might be an area where you could capitalize in the market, and don't want to besmirch Roster Resource at all. It's a great product, but we're just kind of looking at small areas where we might be able to capitalize. But first of all, Bubba, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure chatting with you outside of the time we get to hang out in Arizona. So this is great. And this is kind of a fun one because Roster Resource is a phenomenal tool, as you mentioned, but there's always a couple that make your head kind of scratch, and that's where you can dig in and maybe find an advantage in your drafts.
Yeah. I like to do this episode around this time every year. And it helps me kind of get a sense of am I right about the way I think something's going to play out, that type of thing. So let's just start with the Athletics. We're going alphabetical, and since they are now just the Athletics, we will start with them. My one area to discuss here was just that Osvaldo Bido, who had a really solid run for them last year in the second half in the rotation. He was actually someone you could use in mixed leagues. They do not, Roster Resource currently does not have Osvaldo Bido projected to make the Athletics rotation. They've got him opening there at AAA, although there is actual reporting in a semi-recent Mining the News that at least suggests to me that Bido is kind of penned into that rotation to start the year. I did take Bido very late in a recent Draft Champions. I think he was available because of Roster Resource projecting him to open the year at AAA. Am I misreading this, Bubba? Do you think that they've currently, for the record, they've got Mitch Spence in the rotation over him, and Joey Estes, I believe, in the rotation over him in those bottom two spots in that rotation?
Yeah, you're not, at least in my opinion, you're not misreading this. I'm a big Osvaldo fan as well. He helped me a ton towards the end of 2024. And if you look at a team like the A's now, given if we would have talked a month ago, they now signed Severino, they traded for Spring. So they've actually put pitchers in this team instead of just a bunch of minor leaguers that we don't know if they're quad A players or what just yet. But one thing with the A's, even as they're spending money now, I can't fool me just yet. But Osvaldo's almost 30 years old. So they're going to throw him out there, try to trade him, do what they got to do there. Then you bring the youngster Spence up and go from the Spence is 23 years old. So there's no, or Estes, sorry, Spence is 26. There's really no rush to get Estes up by any means. So I'd be shocked if Osvaldo is not in that rotation. It'd be a big, I think, well, they're used to doing missed service for their fans, but that's one I think he did well. An ADP of 480 over the last 10 DCs. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not a league winner or like a big target or anything, but definitely a guy that I think you'll be able to use throughout the season at certain points. Now, Arizona, again, it doesn't seem like there's anywhere for Jordan Lawler to play. I don't necessarily even disagree with that approach by the Diamondbacks. He's dealt with a ton of injuries, and he hasn't even established himself as a viable everyday big league shortstop yet. So understand not gifting him a job, but it does appear to me that he would open the year back at AAA. And then now we've got just this incredible rotation depth that they've all of a sudden stockpiled, and it's looking like there's a chance Ryan Nelson opens the year at AAA as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the Lawler situation, but also just, how do you expect that rotation to sort of shake out, or do you think they might not be done making moves?
Yeah, the Lawler one, it just makes sense. He starts at AAA, as you mentioned. Eugenio Suarez obviously shocked the world last year, so kind of clogged up a potential third base, and Perdomo plays great shortstop defense. So Lawler gets some more reps. We'll see him at some point this season. When it comes to Ryan Nelson, that's a rough one because, like you said, they made some moves, getting Burns in there. The thing is, I think they're trading. They're trying to get rid of Jordan Montgomery. There's a lot of minced words mentioned after the offseason between the two. There's no love lost in the front office in Arizona and Jordan Montgomery. So I foresee Montgomery getting traded. You know, Erod's not the pillar of health, and neither is Merrill Kelly of late also. So Ryan Nelson, I think, is going to still have a very, very prominent role in this rotation. I'd say at least 20 starts, if not more. And in a DC, that brings tons of value. He's a much better pitcher than some of these other options they had, but they spent money, so they need to utilize them for now. But Ryan Nelson should. I'm still drafting him, thinking he's going to have an impact at some point this season.
Yeah, and this will be a theme of this episode. Really, is just there's a handful of starting pitchers that at least I like, who, if you go to the roster resource rotation page for their team, they are not projected to make the rotation. Ryan Nelson, I do like quite a bit. I haven't checked. I like to not go back and look at like old gladiators, but I think I might have Ryan Nelson in a gladiator. I think he's at least got a shot to open the year in the rotation. I think he spends the vast majority of the year in the rotation. The Jordan Montgomery thing, like obviously he was going to pick up that player option, but yeah, I think that's kind of a sunk cost almost for them. But we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I'm not shying off Ryan Nelson. If he's like, I wouldn't expect you'd have to take him anymore as like one of your first 9 pitchers in a 15-team league. If you can get him as like your first or second starter on the bench, I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'd be a fan of that for sure. And one thing I'll mention, because he said there's a trend of starting pitchers. We see it every year, James. You know this. Every team's going to use 8, 9, 10 starting pitchers throughout the season. So some of these guys that might be on the cusp as a SP6 on a team, they'll be quite viable depending on ADP. That's for sure.
Right. And sometimes those openings occur during spring training before the season even starts. So Atlanta. So this one is not a case where someone we like is excluded from the rotation. It's a case where there's someone's going to make the rotation who I will not like. At least that's the way things look right now. Roster resources saying Ian Anderson gets the 5th spot. Their top 4, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach, Grant Holmes. Yes, I do think Grant Holmes is kind of locked into one of those spots right now.
Should do.
And I don't mind Grant Holmes, but the other 3, Ian Anderson, AJ Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, do you think they really go into the year with one of those 3? Do you think they add someone else? And then if they do go into the year with one of those 3, do you care who it is? Is there one of those guys you actually like?
This one bugs me every draft champions draft I'm in right now, because I see all these guys sitting on the board. And I'm like, okay, someone's pitching this year. Do I want them though? Like you're saying is the question. A team like the Braves is always so close to competing. Why don't I thought they should have brought Morton back. I was drafting Charlie Morton like they were going to bring him back. He still goes to Baltimore. That's fine. But I was hoping he was coming back to Atlanta to take that 5th spot and make this conversation null and void. But one of these guys is probably going to get it. And the guess is as good as yours, as mine, and whoever else's. I think AJ Smith-Shawver might be the most exciting one in the group out of the 3. Ian Anderson maybe has had the most legs in the big. That's why roster resource gives him the upper hand. Bryce Elder had a stint of being good, but then there's a lot of blow up involved in that situation. So if I had to pick one, I like Smith-Shawver the best out of the 3. If that's the direction I'm going, then I'd probably go Anderson, then Elder. Again, they're all going to have their chances this year. Are they going to be worth starting when they have those chances? $1 million question. I still think the Braves make a move though, so this might not be that big of a deal right out the gate. But time will tell with this Braves rotation, who with Holmes and Schwellenbach basically showing up last year, has really muddied things up there in a good way.
Yeah, I think Smith-Shawver would be the one where if he looked good in spring training, he might like get me back in. I don't really think there's anything Ian Anderson or Bryce Elder could do to kind of get my trust during spring training. But I also, just through kind of researching for this pod, I am fairly like I'm kind of on the high end of Spencer Strider just in terms of like I think it's closer to 5 months out of him in the big leagues than 4 months, at least just kind of based on the reporting that I'm seeing out there. So I actually don't mind Spencer Strider, even though I am pretty risk averse. I just think he's a little mispriced right now, but that's part of the reason why there's this gaping hole in that 5th spot. Baltimore just doesn't seem like there's anywhere at the moment for Heston Kjerstad or Kobe Mayo to play regularly. Roster Resource sees it the same way I do. They've got Kobe Mayo opening back at AAA and Heston Kjerstad opening with a spot on that bench. So I guess what's your interest level in those two in draft champions? Do you think one of them gets traded for pitching? Do you think the Orioles are able to find a taker for like a Ryan Mountcastle? What's your interest level with those two exciting young hitters?
I have not even tried to draft Mayo just yet because I like Westburg a lot. I think there's a lot of situations going on in that infield, and obviously all it takes is an injury. But Mayo's kind of out of the way from just the way they utilized him last year, even when they had the chance to utilize him. Kind of makes me think they're going to need to, like Westburg's going to miss the whole year again or something for Mayo to get a healthy run. Could be wrong. So I'm kind of out on Mayo for now. With Heston Kjerstad, this one's a little more interesting to me. It's like they have Ryan O'Hearn blocking him essentially from being the left-handed DH, and this is where the Orioles frustrated us last year with these young players. What are you going to do? Play them, but they're not. O'Hearn's cheap, so it makes sense. I could see a world where O'Hearn gets moved or maybe underperforms a couple months, and Heston gets a good run. They're also an outfield injury away. He's got a clearer path to time than Mayo does. Neither one's super clear, but you know what I'm trying to say there. So Heston Kjerstad is a guy I don't mind. Just know there's a chance he's not playing for a month or two until he gets a run, or he's not consistently. We're in a weekly league. He's going to help you a ton. But I do like him more so over the long term of the season. But, there's always the curveball, like you mentioned. They keep saying they need pitching, so you could package those two real easily and get a stud pitcher. But if they're staying on the team, I'm taking Kjerstad. I'm not interested in Mayo.
Yeah, it's funny. Kjerstad and Ryan O'Hearn are basically going right next to each other in DCs right now. O'Hearn does have that first base outfield eligibility, which is nice. I kind of think it's sort of they're going into the year with the, an enviable amount of depth, and I think it's a very clean roster to me on paper. They've got they can basically take an injury to anyone.
Yep.
And they've got someone ready to step up. It's just a little frustrating for us, obviously. And I also think you're right about Kjerstad being closer to helping us. And he also did show more against big league pitching than Mayo did. So he would be the one to go after. I was much more into that idea before they signed Tyler O'Neill. Where like now I don't know if I can assume Kjerstad's getting 500 plate appearances. So you do have to pay for him. Heston Kjerstad going around 335. So he's not free by any means, but we'll move on to Boston here. Seems like the new regime would not have handed out the Masataka Yoshida contract, but they're unable to pass it off on anyone else. So we're kind of waiting for a move. Obviously the Tristan Casas rumors have been kind of an all off season type of thing. And it's been something that I think has suppressed, enthusiasm just because there is that Seattle landing spot, hanging out there with him. But as things stand, there is a little bit of a logjam because they have two of the four best prospects in the game, and they're both essentially big league ready in Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell. Roman Anthony, obviously an outfielder by trade. Christian Campbell probably going to end up as the Red Sox long-term second baseman. So let's start with the outfield. I phrased it like this: who has the fewest plate appearances at the end of the season out of Cedar Rafaela, Willie Abreu, and Roman Anthony?
That is a fun one indeed. Are they plate appearances for the Red Sox? No,
no, they're just fewest plate appearances.
Okay. I still think it's Roman Anthony because I think Abreu and Rafael are starting the season there, and it's going to take a transaction or an injury to get him up sooner than people want. Like, he's ready, like everyone's saying. Anywhere you look, it's all Roman Anthony talk, especially if you're a Boston fan. But the reality is they like Rafaela's defense. He's going to be playing there. and Bray is going to be in the strong side of a platoon at best. So I think Roman Anthony is the odd man out to the dismay of many fantasy peoples, but you are obviously the prospect guy, and you will draft more prospects than I will, so I could be wrong.
Well, I might draft more than you, but
because I just don't draft any, basically.
Right? Yeah, I'm not leaning into Roman Anthony. I'll put it this way: like I also don't have any Rafaela or Abreu shares, just because I've been a little gun shy on the whole situation. And all these guys are relatively expensive, based on what they've kind of shown at the big league level. So, like even Rafaela, like I loved him last year, loved the center field defense, but he's someone you want hitting in the bottom third of the lineup. And if he goes, if he hits 200 with a 260 OBP for a month, I don't know if his playing time is as safe as we'd like to think, just because of the defense, because of all the options they have. So a trade would give me a lot more confidence in all these guys. Like if there was just a one fewer guy on the team, then I'd feel good about drafting everyone. But it does have me a little worried. Now on the second base side of things, I would, and the drafting public certainly agrees, Christian Campbell over David Hamilton. Do you think that's something that could happen on opening day, or is that one where we're just going to be kind of waiting for someone to kind of not be performing before Campbell gets a shot?
Now, Campbell just skyrocketed last year from everything I've seen. So I would imagine Hamilton starts the year, but a good spring training could change that, because Hamilton, I think we have an idea of who he is. Not a ton of power, a ton of speed, like probably a better utility guy off the bench than an everyday second baseman, where Campbell at least makes it appear that he should be a pretty good everyday second baseman. So that's the one in this prospect group where a good spring training from him, maybe a bad from Hamilton, could see Campbell much sooner than like the Roman Anthony on the team. Like I see an avenue where Campbell, because he, to me, is better than David Hamilton. It's just a matter of when do the Red Sox want to start the clock.
Right. David Hamilton would be a very high quality utility player off the bench. The Cubs. So we've got this fifth starter spot, and I can just tell you, I will not be drafting any Javier Assad, who is currently listed as the fifth starter on Roster Resource. Would certainly expect Matthew Boyd, who they signed, to get that fourth spot. So it is one spot. Ben Brown is the most exciting name out there. Eno's talked about him on the show. He's certainly someone where you can dream on the stuff, and the command has gotten better than I thought it would. Is he someone you would just draft now and assume that he could win that spot, or just you're kind of drafting the skills with a guy like Ben Brown? Is it, you think the price is fair there?
Yeah, the price is fair to me. This is one of those teams where I like a lot of these sixth and seventh options potentially. So Ben Brown is one that I don't mind taking later. Even Jordan Wicks is another guy I'm interested in taking at their later ADPs in a DC just for depth, because I'm with you. Like Javier, as my co-host Ryan Bloomfield calls him, facade. Is probably not long further. You can only smoke and mirrors it for so long. Now, if he does it, congratulations. But you mentioned Ben Brown; he's got much better stuff, much better potential than an Assad. I think even Jordan, has better potential as well. So I would be going after a Ben Brown and going. It's funny you mentioned the Assad, because I'm in a DC. I'm around like 36, but in the early 30s, I just kept walking past him in the draft room, just going right past him every time. I just wanted nothing to do with that profile. So I'm with you. Ben Brown is very enticing, and I don't mind Jordan Wicks either.
Okay, now here's my long shot that I think the price is right to just see where it goes. Nate Pearson, I can't really find any good reporting on, he's definitely a reliever. They're definitely not stretching him out, but obviously was a starting pitcher not that long ago. He just really kind of salvaged his name value, at least to me, after the trade. Was much better after the Cubs got their hands on him. I like the idea of just drafting him, and maybe by May or June he's getting saves. Maybe by May or June they're stretching him out. Any interest in just taking a flyer and seeing what the Cubs do with Nate Pearson?
100%. This is a guy that I think is the future closer for the Cubs. It's like a Michael Kopech all over again.
Yeah,
we know this guy with his great, velocity. He's got nasty stuff. No command as a starter. No consistency long term as a starter. I think he fits the bullpen role great. He's actually pitched very well in the limited bullpen situation that he's had. And Porter Hodge, it was a nice story, but I think Pearson's got the better goods, and I would be drafting him as a later round saves potential for sure.
Yeah, just ADP on Nate Pearson, 546. So he's very affordable. I think he's a really nice just draft champions piece because even if he's not getting saves, you might be able to just plug him in whenever you don't have 9 guys you feel really good about.
100%.
The White Sox. So, we've got Luis Robert, Andrew Vaughn, and Andrew Benintendi kind of locked into their roles as of now. And then we've got a bunch of other guys that, none of us really care that much about fighting for the other 6 spots in that lineup. Is there one White Sox hitter other than those 3 I mentioned, Robert, Vaughn, Benintendi, that you are interested in and are hoping actually gets an everyday job here?
It sounds dirty to talk about any other White Sox player, but the one I will mention has an ADP of 458 over the last 10 drafts, and that's Lenyn Sosa, just for the reason second base, third base eligible in a DC. That's that corner CIMI for now penciled in to start at third base for the White Sox. Again, a lot can change in this team, but if you're going to believe he's going to play regularly, we've seen pop inconsistent. We've seen pop from him. He's projected to hit like 6th in the lineup. Not a great lineup, but it's just in the DC, you're looking for at-bats, and at-bats like potentially could lead to like run production. And Lenyn Sosa with that MICI flexibility at that ADP, he's at least caught my attention. I've gotten a lot of flack for that comment on other shows, and I get it, but we are talking the White Sox here, so pick your poison, basically.
No, you're going to get the opposite of flack on this show for that comment. I love that call. That was going to be I basically wrote that question to talk about Lenyn Sosa. So,
beautiful.
Now my one, it's not like a slam dunk, like put him on all my teams type of thing, because there are just so many guys just jockeying for playing time at second base and third base, the 2 spots where he's really solid at. So, he's not a made man. Like he's not just assured of a job all season, but if he played a full season, I think he would out earn a lot of the second basemen who are going 150 picks earlier. So it's just a question of, can he hold the job all year and compile those counting stats for us? And he's not going to run as much as we'd like for just these cheap middle infielders, but he could hit 15 plus homers, not hurt your batting average at all. So I think Sosa with the multi-eligibility is a really nice DC piece. And then I'll just answer this one. So we've got Edgar Caro vying for one of the catching spots. We've got Colson Montgomery, theoretically their shortstop of the future. Brian Ramos, I also thought showed really well for the big club in September. So like chances of all of those 3 guys making the White Sox opening day roster, none are currently projected to by Roster Resource. I do still think Edgar Caro can go win a spot. They've got Matt Thaiss on the roster as kind of, insurance in case Caro isn't ready in the spring. He's out of options, but I think you could DFA Matt Thaiss if Edgar Caro's looking ready in the spring. I really don't think there's anything left for him to do, but it's not as much of a lock to me as it was a couple months ago. And then I would expect Montgomery and Ramos to probably head back to AAA just because the White Sox do have a handful of guys like Miguel Vargas, Sosa, Jacob Amaya with no options remaining. So I don't mind Ramos's price in DCs, but don't expect those Montgomery or Ramos to make the roster. Cincinnati, I think this one's pretty obvious, and Roster Resource agrees, but I think Noel V. Marte opens there at AAA. What say you?
Yeah, especially as they keep making moves for Gavin Lux and other pieces, and the lack of production last year. It's kind of like the Orioles, but not quite like the Orioles. They have a bunch of depth, which is nice to have. And yeah, this time last year, James, you and I were waxing poetic about Noelvi Marte shares, and that didn't pan out. And I think AAA is destined for he needs to get it figured out because the talent's there. It's just not producing.
Yeah, and I think it's a good move by the Reds to go this route and not just kind of guarantee him playing time. Because I think he probably needs to, adjust some things in his life and just the way he's approaching the game and stuff. So, I wasn't in on grabbing Noelvi at a discount even before the Lux move, just because I don't really know what he is anymore. You have the PD thing, but just how bad he was after coming back, like I just don't know what he is necessarily. So I don't really mind if he has a huge bounce back year this year and he's not on my teams. I just kind of want to get a better idea for what type of player he is. In the rotation, Rhett Lauder also probably ticketed for AAA, which again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, a little bit more seasoning at AAA and having that rotation depth is totally fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an easy move to AAA, solid for him. He kind of feels like their version of Ryan Nelson. So he'll get his at some point, but it's not going to be out the gate.
And Cleveland, I had a few things that popped up with Cleveland. So John Kenzie Noel talked about him a little bit with Dr. Dave a couple weeks ago. I think he's talented enough to see more playing time as the year goes on, but what type of role do you think John Kenzie Noel opens up in for Cleveland?
Yeah, I think he's a bench, like platoon DH potentially right now. It's real tricky. I agree. The talent's there. He's got that Franmil Reyes in him, but they actually have left-handed bats in place that'll make it tough for him to play every day.
Yeah, I'm kind of envisioning him just seeing more playing time as the season goes on, but I don't think you can expect to confidently use him in early April.
Like maybe 450 plate appearances. Is that going to be what you want? Maybe. Yeah.
I would take that. On the teams where I have John Kenzie Noel, I would take 450. Cool. So second base, they have Juan Brito is the option that Roster Resource is going with as the everyday second baseman. He's a switch hitter. He's kind of a bat first middle infielder, which is kind of a rarity for the Guardians. Usually it's these glove first hit tool guys, and it's a question of how much power they'll get to. But Brito can actually hit for some power. And then you've got Angel Martinez, Daniel Schneemann, Tyler Freeman hanging around. Do you care who starts at second base? Do you have a feeling for who it's going to be? Do you think it matters for your fantasy teams?
I'd pretty much skip this position because I have no idea. Brito is one that many like. Obviously, they all want Bazzana to come up, but he's starting in the minors for sure, in my opinion. But it's a position I have zero idea of how they're going to break this one down. It's probably the hottest hand at spring training takes this one. And I don't know if you want any of them for fantasy, to tell you the truth, because they don't bring any massive skill set right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I definitely don't want Martinez, Schneemann, or Freeman, and I think Brito's price. He's just not that exciting. Kyle Manzardo. This is when someone asked me this the other day, whether Manzardo is going to pick up first base eligibility in season after they signed Carlos Santana, and I don't think it's a given. I think he probably does, just based on it being 162 games. Like Santana's probably banged up at some point or whatever, but Santana's defense at first base and just general kind of intangibles is kind of why he's still hanging around and getting these deals. I don't think they're going to just have those two split time at DH and then waste Santana's defense that way. So do you see it kind of the same way? Or do you have any interest in Manzardo despite the UT only going into the season?
We had a good 5-minute window where Manzardo was getting first base eligibility in 10 games. And then that disappeared when Carlos Santana was signed. And I love the signing. Carlos Santana is a very serviceable guy. So it definitely pushes Manzardo back. He will get it, like you said, at some time. This feels one, though, where it's like he gets a couple of games here, a couple of games here. It might be 2-3 months All-Star break before he gets it, because the defense is huge, and they have that pitching staff that needs the defense behind them. So, and Santana's a switch hitter, so it's not he's going to sit. They're both, and so Manzaro's going to DH primarily, unless they surprise us, James. Maybe they say, "Hey, Santana, you're getting old. We want to get the kid out there, work with him, whatever." But I'm thinking it's going to be a few months before you see first base eligibility when Manzardo gets it.
Yeah, I agree. So just keep that in mind. Just assume Manzardo's UT only, I guess is kind of how I would probably phrase it. And then Chase DeLauder, he's not, roster resource isn't giving him a job, but I think he could win a job in the spring. It's weird to say, but I've phrased it like they should use all the bullets in his legs while they have them, because I just don't know how long Chase DeLauder is going to be able to patrol the outfield. So if he's healthy in the spring and he's had a monster spring training, I think he could displace Will Brennan pretty easily, but I think he would have to kind of kick the door down there. Colorado, Bubba, I think Jordan Beck's got some pretty exciting tools. Was one of their better prospects before exhausting eligibility. Just an athletic, big, powerful outfielder. Roster Resource currently has him on the short side of a platoon with Nolan Jones. I don't really buy the idea that Jordan Beck would be on the big league roster and only playing against lefties, especially under the assumption here that Sam Hilliard and Chris Bryant are everyday players, which is the way they're listed on Roster Resource. So personally, I think this is an opportunity to maybe buy on Jordan Beck, not as one of your starting outfielders, but I don't think he would be on the big league roster and not playing pretty regularly.
100% ADP of 458 over the last 10 drafts. Like, that is an amazing target. Everyone talks ballpark, obviously, but yes, Chris Bryant, full season. That's not happening. Sam Hilliard playing over a potential stud prospect. It is the Rockies. I'll give them that much, but that's just crazy. And I'm not going to give up on Nolan Jones just yet. So Jordan Beck's going to play he'll be the second most plate appearances in the outfield behind Brenton Doyle by the end of the season. I'd be willing to say that he should, unless the Rockies really go full Rockies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind, like, if you want to get Sam Hilliard super late in your DCs, I don't even mind it, but just don't expect Jordan Beck to be a bench outfielder.
100%.
Now, catcher, I've been kind of banging the Drew Romo drum all offseason just because, like, I think he is their best pure catcher on the roster, and their catcher of the future. Jacob Stallings they signed, but they gave Jacob Stallings backup money, basically. It's not like they're paying him to play a ton of games. And then you've got the Hunter Goodman thing kind of floating around, where, Steamer, Roster Resource, kind of expecting him to play a decent amount, 300 plus plate appearances, even though he's been a negative player whenever he's played. How do you sort of see the catching playing time shaken out there in Colorado? Like, are the people drafting Goodman because he's eligible at catcher going to get enough plate appearances? Are the people drafting Stallings going to get enough plate appearances? What about Drew Romo?
Stallings, no. I've never, he's there for defense and basically veteran leadership. You mentioned the price tag on that one. I like Goodman as a third, fourth catcher, but I'm not going to disagree with the Romo take. I think we see Romo by at least midseason, if not sooner. He'll get plenty of run to finish out the year and see what they have from him. It's just a matter, does Goodman lose out on that or does Stallings lose out on that? That's the $1 million question. Maybe someone gets hurt and makes it easier for us. But I still like Goodman. I have no interest in Stallings, but Romo is a phenomenal pick around 570 in drafts right now. That's a really good. If you are into the fourth catcher market, which I usually am not, that's a good fourth catcher to take.
Or if you're a wild man like me, Drew Romo is a good third catcher to take.
Now that's to be fair, you take catchers earlier, so that's smart. In theory, you're not going to use a backup very often, so that's a great third outfielder or third catcher to have.
Right. Yeah, I'm getting 2 stud catchers and then Drew Romo like 30 rounds later.
Which makes sense.
Now, Detroit, my one question here, like I know there's some moving pieces on the position player depth chart. Most interesting to me is they've got Jackson Jobe listed as the 5th starter to start the year. And they've got Brant Herter as a kind of a long reliever. Kenta Maeda also is a long reliever. Then you got Ty Madden, Kiter Montero, Matt Manning, Alex Faedo at AAA. So who do you think is the Tigers' 5th starter?
where did all this depth come from in Detroit? It's amazing. But I think Jackson Jobe's going to get all the chances to get it. They brought him up in the postseason for a reason. This is their future. I think they want to get him with Scooble as much as possible. So I would draft Jobe like he is going to start. Now the innings is the question. What are you going to get innings wise from Jobe? But I would imagine they'd want him out there. I think he'd be a great actually combination, like piggyback with Herter. That'd be a great 1-2 punch to do some damage in that team if you want to limit innings. But Jobe should be the fifth man.
Yeah, I think it's just all about what they want to do with the innings. I agree with you. I think there's no reason to, like, if he's ready to be in the rotation in spring training, I don't think you just kind of baby him just to baby him out of the gates. But I don't think he'll be able to pitch 6 months, taking the ball every fifth day in the big league rotation, obviously. But I think he can go into spring training and win a job. I do still like Brant Herter. Jobe's ADP, 282 basically, min of 239 over the past few weeks. And then Herter going around pick 502, so much later there, and then obviously Jobe, much higher ceiling than Herter, but I think the workload is the one thing there with Jobe. I still wouldn't project him for more than 125 or so.
I was thinking 120, so yeah.
Houston. Houston is the new Cleveland, Bubba, where they just they don't value outfield because they'll figure it out with their outfielders. And so you've got Chas McCormick, Jake Myers. I wrote down Zach DiCenzo, Jacob Melton. There's also Taylor Trammell. So any intriguing outfield flyers here on the new team punt OF Houston?
Yep, you hit on my guy. He's first base eligible, but he's playing outfield in the winter leagues right now, and that's DiCenzo. I think the fact that they're working at first base, third base, now they're working him in the outfield. They want his bat in the lineup, and you mentioned the mess that is that outfield. Assuming they don't bring anybody in, that's the guy I'm looking at. ADP 630. I'll take that dart every time, and then you might get a corner infield outfield guy eligible at some point in a DC. So that's the guy I've been targeting. That's the guy I've been pumping up, even on a recent first base preview pod. I said, go take him at 630 and see what you can do. So, yeah, I like Zach DiCenzo quite a bit, and I'm hoping that actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Basically wrote this question to talk about Zach DiCenzo, and I actually got too greedy in my most recent DC. I needed him too, and I just kept getting greedy and missed out. But yeah, I think it's just, he's first base eligible. Like, This is the dream. Like, there just aren't any first basemen worth taking seemingly after pick 400. But DiCenzo's got just insane bat speed. I look at just these other guys. It's like, even if what does Taylor Trammell working out even look like? What does Jake Myers if Jake Myers works out, what does that even look like? At least with DiCenzo, it's 25 plus homer power, and there's actual breakout potential there. So and the price, like you said, it's just he's basically free. So yeah, I love that, and I think the moving him to right field makes a lot of sense to me. Like, he's an interesting athlete. Like, he's this big 6'4", runs well. Like, he's probably too big to play third base, but I like the idea of putting his arm in right field. So seems like a smash pick. You and I both agree on that one.
Yep.
Kansas City, a little uncertainty as to who wins the last spot or two in that rotation. Do you have a favorite of their candidates? Chris Bubich, Alec Marsh, Kyle Wright, and Michael Lorenzen?
It's a weird one. I just drafted Lorenzen because they paid him to actually probably be a fifth starter. I'll take my chances there. And he was decent to finish the season. I had a lot of Alec Marsh shares last year, and that worked out well until it didn't, but then it kind of worked out a little bit in the end. So I'm leaning Lorenzen. I like some Marsh. I would be honest, though, and I know I'm probably going to make people angry by not picking just one, but Bubich is interesting to me. Just because the switch to the bullpen worked out well. We saw some velocity switches. Can they work with them? Once a prospect that people were interested in. It's super late. I get it, but for me, if I had to pick one, it's Lorenzen, just because I think he has the job out of spring.
Yeah, I like Bubich's. I think there's upside with Bubich.
Yeah, agreed.
I think Marsh Lorenzen, Wright. Like I think they're streamer potential, but I think Bubic. I mean, and I've never been a Bubic guy, but he was just so good as a reliever last year. Like sometimes that kind of unlocks something, and you go back to the rotation. There's ratio upside there. There's just breakout potential, I think, with Bubic. So, and they've talked about, even if you might not see him, like, so roster resource does not, or they do actually have him in there. Man, I actually think they might have updated that recently. Maybe not, but yeah, the reporting suggests that the Royals want Bubic to start. So, yeah, definitely don't mind that one. Los Angeles Angels. I actually didn't think there were any real depth chart questions here that popped up to me. But I guess, are you interested at all in seeing what Reed Detmers and or Caden Dana look like in spring training? Or are you kind of moving on from the whole Detmers thing?
I can't quit Detmers. I just can't do it. A guy with the strikeout potential, I guess I'll say, at an ADP, it's 365, so it's more than usual, but still, a guy with that kind of upside still intrigues me, to say the least. And if you want to get technical, he had the 6.7 ERA, but a 3.86 xFIP. Still had an 18% K to walk, 28% K rate. Like there was a lot of good to go with a ton of bad, like the almost 10% walk rate, obviously not great. So it's kind of pick your poison. But if you're looking for a depth piece that could maybe unlock upside, because we've seen him be very good. I don't hate it, but yeah, it's not like I'm running to draft any Angels pitcher really outside of maybe Kikuchi. But out of those two, I'd be interested in Detmers.
All right, really quick, because I know you follow the Giants closely. They're right next to each other in ADP. Reed Detmers or Kyle Harrison?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think Harrison's better, but I have no idea what his shoulder situation is. They haven't reported on it that I've seen at all this offseason, which doesn't make me feel great, honestly. So I'd go Detmers.
All right, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Who plays more, Haesung Kim or Andy Pages?
That is one that's going to torture me because I have so many Pages shares before all these transactions took place. Like I expected Teoscar, but Conforto, not so much. I think with the latest Lux move, Kim plays more. I think they want that defense out there because they have plenty of bats. You don't need 9 amazing all-star hitters. So I'm going to go Kim, sadly enough.
I'm going Pages.
Thank you. That makes me feel better already.
I'm fading the Kim. I don't know if there's hype on Kim, but I'm just not buying it. And I think the landing spot's actually great because I think people are going to draft him more now.
100%.
But I mean, even if you just kind of read the reporting, like they're viewing him as a util guy, and Tommy Edman is just sitting there as like a perfect option at second base.
I'd like that.
And so I think Andy Pages, he's not like a Gold Glove center fielder by any stretch, but he is a value add defensive outfielder. Just generally, he can play all 3 spots. Has a good arm. I think he's a very obvious breakout bat.
Mm-hmm.
And like Kim's offensive upside, it doesn't warrant more than 350, 400 plate appearances this year. And they signed him to a contract where, if he ends up being anything more than just a solid bench infielder, it's a bonus for them, but they don't need him to be that. And this is an important developmental year for Pages. So
yep.
I think it's an opportunity to buy him. I actually kind of feel better about Pages playing time than like Heston Kjerstad, who I've been comparing those guys kind of all off season, but
I agree with that. I agree with that because Pages is like at least the 4th outfielder, barring maybe stepping in. Because I like the idea of the Edman move. I agree with that logic behind it all. So that makes more sense. Like he could slide in a lot easier than Heston could. Heston's blocked by Ryan O'Hearn. Never thought he'd say those things, but he is. So I'm with you there. And looking at Pages, it's fun. His ADP, it's down to like 410 now, and he's gone as low as 481. Like everything you said, I agree with. I think it's a potential breakout year. I had so many shares now. I was like kind of like, oh, this is not ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it the well, never mind. There was one night where we were talking about him at first pitch. So any targets for you among the kind of locked in health permitting rotation options, like Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow. We don't need to get into those guys, but Gonsolin, May, Bobby Miller, Landon Knack, Justin Robleski. Like, any interest in any of those guys?
It's rough. Not really. Like it sucks because all these guys will have their moments with the Dodgers. So like Landon Knack, I actually have been a fan there, but postseason does not make you feel great. I just don't know what, like, Dustin May's got the nastiest stuff, but no control and very hittable without the control. I guess Tony Gonsolin, if you believe in the health, would be the guy. Like, we've seen him be good. It's just a health question. So I'll say Tony Gonsolin, but it's going to be a revolving door, it feels like, there with the Dodgers.
Yeah, Dustin May and Bobby Miller are the two I'm not in on. I kind of think Bobby Miller's broken, and Dustin May, I'm just out on him as a starter. Health wise, like, I just don't think he can handle it. The other three, Gonsolin, Knack, Robleski, if the price is right, actually, I'm somewhat interested, just because it is still the best show in town for pitcher wins. So, and like Robleski's dirt cheap, Gonsolin's going around like middle of the 400s. I don't mind that price at all. So, Miami, Bubba, this one, like, Derek Hill is, I guarantee he's going to play more than roster resources projecting. Derek Hill, former Tigers prospect, who's just, like, his bread and butter for years was just one of the best defensive center fielders in the minors, but just questionable, with the bat, questionable durability. But the Marlins front office has been kind of on record of, like, mentioning Derek Hill as someone they want to play along with other guys that we assume they want to see. Kyle Stowers, like, who they traded for, and we assume they want to see Connor Norby and Sanchez and Edwards and stuff. But I think they view Derek Hill in that sort of same way, even though he is older than those guys. And Griffin Conine is simply just not going to stop Derek Hill from being in the lineup. If Derek Hill is injured, he won't be in the lineup, but Griffin Conine is not going to be playing over Derek Hill, which is how roster research currently has it.
Yep, I love that call, and I wish you didn't mention it because it's ADP 690, so it's really nice. But the power is awesome, especially he destroys left-handed pitching, which would make sense for the platoon. Like you said, I think there's more to that. His first real opportunity to have some run would be great. And, like, the other part is Griffin Conine, just the profile. Yeah, it's cool. Dad played for the Marlins. Okay. Awesome. But you look at the overall profile, there's not a lot to like there at all. So it'd be crazy to have Hill sit for him, that's for sure.
Yeah, this one, I've been talking about this just in DMs and stuff with other people for a few weeks. So the time to get Derek Hill with one of your last picks, I think that should probably dry up here. Augustin Ramirez, talked about him this offseason. I do think he'll go to spring training with a chance to win a spot. He's not the greatest defensive catcher, but Liam Hicks was the Rule 5 pick. If Liam Hicks makes the team, then I think, we might not see Augustin Ramirez, but I think they like Hicks's bat more than his glove. So there's a chance they could carry 3 technical catchers and play Hicks a lot at first base, where he only has to be better than Jonah Bride to play. So I think Augustin Ramirez could still make the team out of spring training, but probably more likely that he heads to AAA to start the year. And then, they've got Matt Mervis, Graham Pauley, some, has been prospects of note, and then Adam Mazur, who they picked up from the Padres. Of those 3, I'm interested in Mazur. He was one of the best strike throwers at AAA all last season, and if you just look at, like, real pitching prospects, he was the best strike thrower at AAA last season. So, and he's got mid-90s velocity. The rest of the characteristics on his pitches aren't that great, but just a guy with that level of strike throwing, I'm interested, but not so much in Mervis or Pauley. I don't know if you have any thoughts on those guys.
Yeah, Mervis, I wish him well. Pauley had some optimism at one point, but again, I don't think so. I like the Mazur call, though, because there was a point where he thought he was going to come up with the Padres before he got traded, and that didn't really work. So, yeah, I think that's a nice speculate for a team that is always in need of pitching.
The Brewers, what are you kind of forecasting as Caleb Durbin's role for them to start the year? Because at roster resource, they've got him short side platoon with Oliver Dunn at third base.
In my perfect world, it goes Durbin at second, Terrain at short, Ortiz at third. That's how I would set things up and just go that way, or any mix of that. Just play those three. Like Oliver Dunn is who we thought he was, and he's at best a utility player, not a starting player for the Milwaukee Brewers. And no offense to Dunn if you're listening, but I think Caleb Durbin, you traded for the guy. We know who he is. He's an older prospect. You get him out there and you take advantage of it now. You get on base, you run, you try to score some runs. So I think he plays more than platoon role. That's my 2 cents. We'll have to wait and see, but Dunn should not be holding him back.
Yeah, this is kind of a layup. I just, I know the Brewers had hopes for Dunn last year. But yeah, he's certainly who we thought he was. He might not be who they thought he was, but sure. I agree with you on that. Like we want Terang, Ortiz, and Durbin to be playing. Mm-hmm. I think it would fit best if you move Terang to short, but he's so good at second. Like I think that's kind of the holdup is that they want to keep all these guys in the middle infield. Someone's got to play third base though. So I think it's probably Durbin. And I think if you just look at the way they managed Joey Ortiz last year, where it wasn't just, it wasn't like from opening day on, it wasn't everyday player Joey Ortiz. He kind of had to keep performing and keep kind of earning his starts. But then by, end of April, it was pretty locked in. I think that's kind of how it goes with Durbin. So just don't cut him like that first week of April. If he only starts half the games, I do think the cream rises to the top there. Tyler Black, roster resource says Tyler Black makes the team as just a bench piece. I just don't see it. He does not. He's just not a Brewers player at all. Like I guess he works the count, which the Brewers like. But aside from him working the count and stealing bases, like he's just he has no place to play defensively. Does not hit for anywhere near enough power to play DH. So I assume they've been shopping him all off season. But if they are unable to trade Tyler Black, I would expect him to head back to AAA.
Yep, that checks out with me too.
And Aaron Ashby, do you think he makes the rotation?
I'm drafting him like he has an impact this year. I hope he makes the rotation. I like him and DL Hall, honestly. I'm drafting both guys that have their moments in the sun. I don't know if either one makes a full rotation spot, but I think they're both viable in DCs. But I think Aaron Ashby has a good chance. What is Woodruff's situation? Like they're saying he's going to be ready, but I have no idea what's going on with him. It's such a weird injury.
So in December 9th, we have a note on RotoWire where GM Matt Arnold says it's hard to say at the moment whether Woodruff will be part of the team's opening day rotation. Like to me, he's missing the first month basically.
Yep.
So, and I know on roster resource, like it's tough with the injury questions. Like, is this guy going to be ready for opening day? They've got Woodruff in the rotation. I think that's a mistake to be. Don't look at Woodruff in the rotation on roster resource and think like I can draft this guy. Like he'll be ready for opening day. Would not count on that. And then that's the spot that I think Ashby or Hall or even Chad Patrick, who they protected from the Rule 5 draft, is mildly interesting. So I think they probably just kind of mix and match until Woodruff's ready. And if you draft Woodruff, I would just be hoping he's ready around the start of May.
Yep.
Minnesota. So we've got 3 locked-in rotation spots with Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Bailey Ober. And then we've got roster resources showing Simeon Wood-Richardson, Chris Paddock in the 4 and 5 spots. They've also got Zebby Matthews and David Festa, who will surely be competing for those spots in spring training. So who do you think gets the 4th and 5th starter spots there in Minnesota?
I'm going to say I want David Festa to get 1. And then I think Simeon gets the other one. Like I know some might think like Zebby Matthews was awesome in the minors, hiccups in the bigs, but it's first stint. I'm not going to hold that against him. it just feels like Chris Paddock, they're paying him and they're pushing him. So somehow I think SWR gets the way out on that one for now. And you're going to see Festa and Paddock there because they can't really send Paddock to the bullpen, I don't think. So that's where I see it unfolding, but I wouldn't close the book on Matthews or SWR this season.
Yeah, I think Festa's the only one I'm drafting.
That's fair.
Zebby, I definitely don't hold his big league numbers against him, but wouldn't surprise me if he gets 6 weeks back at AAA.
Yep.
And yeah, Festa, I can't imagine them going from the way Festa, all the signs he showed down the stretch, to just you're not in the rotation.
Yeah.
I just don't really see it going that way. And I think Simeon Wood Richardson would be better suited as kind of a swing man, six starter, long reliever, that type of thing. So now infield, there's been reporting that they want to move Brooks Lee to third, Royce Lewis to second, and then potentially, I think this was from an Athletic article, potentially an Edward Julian, Jose Miranda platoon at first base, which would mean Miranda loses out on a significant amount of playing time if it were to go that way. Roster Resource is not kind of showing that. They're kind of giving Miranda everyday playing time at first base and keeping Brooks Lee at second and Royce Lewis at third. But it just seems to me like unless they are unable to add any infielders, that it will be Lewis to second and Lee to third. And then it's just kind of does Edward Julian get to play, or does Jose Miranda just get to keep playing every day after what he did last season?
Yeah, and Royce Lewis even said in an interview that he's working out, obviously because he's always hurt, but to play more second base this year. He said that himself as well. So that stood out to me. Miranda was like getting so good before he got hurt again, and he actually showing signs versus lefties and righties. To put Edward Julian over Jose Miranda would just be wrong in so many ways. It's a baseball move, though. We've seen worse things on a baseball diamond. I would treat it like Miranda's still the dude. I don't see how Julian could outplay him, but I do agree to your first part. I could see Royce moving to second. Now we got that second, third eligibility thing we've talked about before, which is pretty nice, assuming he can play enough. And with the Twins, assuming people can play is always the big thing.
Yeah, so I mean, Brooks Lee going around pick 380, right next to Jose Tena, ahead of Ernie Clement, just behind Nick Gonzalez, just behind Kobe Mayo. So I think you can plan on Brooks Lee adding third base eligibility in addition to his shortstop eligibility, and likewise with Royce Lewis there. And yeah, I mean, the drafting public's not stupid, but I still think that's a pretty good price on Brooks Lee. And the one knock on him is he's just not going to run as much as you'd like relative to your typical shortstop prospect. But I think the playing time, he's a really good defender, so I think the playing time should be there for Brooks Lee. New York Mets, who do you think is going to play more in 2025, Ronnie Mauricio or Luis Angel Acuna?
Well, my draft shares would say Luis Angel Acuna. The only thing is Mauricio was the dude until his knee gave out. Like there's a reason they're going to want to get him back out there. I'm an Acuna believer. I loved what we saw in the short time and what we've seen over winter ball, just running wild down there. Mauricio should get the run, and they are crowded. Obviously, you're not getting rid of Lindor or anything like that. Vientos has made a statement. I guess a lot of it comes down to what do they do at first base? Do they move Vientos over there? And then you can maybe make a Beatty versus someone argument. I'm going to go with Acuna still, just because I believe in the talent, but it wouldn't shock me with the pedigree of Mauricio to give him the run.
Yeah, man. I asked the question. I do not have a good answer.
It's tricky.
Acuna is the better defender, more versatile defender. And I think Mauricio is going to have a decent amount of rust to knock off. Like it wasn't the smoothest recovery for him. So I think Acuna is more likely to make the opening day roster. I'll just put it at that. But with the Mets, it's like you can't just assume they're done acquiring good baseball players. So,
that is true.
It does seem I do find it unlikely that they would just go into the year giving Brett Beatty a strong side platoon role. just given how all in they are right now. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not even drafting Beatty. No interest.
And they have been talking a lot about Beatty being like a util player this year.
Yep.
The Yankees. So Jason Dominguez is listed as the everyday left fielder on RotoWire, Roster Resource, probably wherever you want to look. Brian Cashman, he doesn't talk about Jason Dominguez as if he's a prospect that Brian Cashman's really excited to see play every day this year. And I also don't think that's how Boone feels about him. So like, how confident should we be in Dominguez just playing every day in April and get nice long leash 2020 season? Here we come.
I'm drafting him as such. If I am, I don't actually know if I have that many shares to begin with, but if I were to draft him, I would assume he's playing every day. Now, as the good Dr. Dave, who you had on recently, would tell you, teams lie. So we got those things because even Brett Boone said, we're going to give him every opportunity to become a full-time outfielder. You could just say our top prospect's going to play every day.
Yeah,
that's something you could say.
Yeah,
so to sugarcoat it doesn't sound great.
So one explanation for all this talk might just be that they don't want Dominguez to think he's got it locked in because they want him to just keep working all off season. Come to camp like he's got to win a job.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, but it doesn't seem like they like him as much as most teams like their number one prospect.
Yeah. I'm pretending he's going to, in my mind, he's playing every day, but the Yankees, the way they're talking, I agree with the sentiments.
Well, my player shares definitely hope that Dominguez is playing every day. But I've moved him like a little bit further down. Like I don't take Dominguez at the top of his ADP. I just kind of wait until that part's passed, and then maybe I'll take him. I couldn't really find anything controversial on Philadelphia's depth chart, but it did jump out to me that Bryson Stott, who provides a lot of stuff we're looking for in fantasy, he might be their number 9 hitter while also sitting against lefties. And even in a lineup that could be as good as Philly's lineup, that's really going to impact the counting stats you can put up. So how worried are you about Stott's potential lineup placement and platoon when the team's at full strength?
Yeah, I did the Stott experience last year, and they platooned him towards the end, and it ended up in a 12-team league, eventually dropping Bryson Stott for some consistent playing time and at bats. So I'm pretty much out because I think it is a real concern. I think it's hitting 9th obviously isn't great. The offense is awesome; it could flip over, he could score a ton of runs. I get the arguments in that regard, but if he's going to platoon where you have to draft him, there's other options in that realm per se. So I am concerned with it. Maybe I'm overdoing it. Maybe I have a bias because it affected me last year, but I think it's what the Phillies want to do. And you mentioned there's not a whole lot of glaring situations in their lineup because they built it as such. And this is one of the platoons they built, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, I think, he's not like he's going right next to Andres Jimenez. And like, we know Jimenez is going to play.
Bingo.
Yep. He's going behind Luis Rengifo. I definitely would take Rengifo, definitely would take Bogarts.
It's tough
if
to
Nico
pick.
Horner's got the injury. I mean, Maikel Garcia I might take.
That's where it gets interesting. But there's, like you said, there's 3 or 4 guys easily, in my mind, you just kind of pass on Stott for at that range.
So Pittsburgh, first of all, they do not have, Roster Research does not have Bubba Chandler in the Pirates opening day rotation. I disagree with that. I think he will win a spot in spring training, has basically no workload restrictions after what he did last year, especially relative to your typical high-end pitching prospect. So I think Bubba Chandler's a wire-to-wire rotation member for the Pirates. And then Nick York, like he's kind of a man without a home necessarily on the depth chart. He's just kind of listed as a reserve with no platoon. But I think he showed a lot of signs. This is a team that might be starting guys like Joshua Palacios, Andrew McCutchen back at DH. Like, what do you think about Nick York's role for the Pirates? And then if you want to comment on my Bubba Chandler statement.
I'll just trust your Bubba Chandler thoughts. I've seen how great he is, and if you believe he's ready for opening day, I'll trust that because I just have no idea with those prospect pitchers how teams want to play. But you put him with Jones and Skeens, that's pretty sweet. When it comes to York, this is a tough one. The hit tool is pretty awesome, like you said, but there's no home because I'm a Nick Gonzalez believer that I think he should play every day. He proved enough, give him some run, and that's like the first place you look for Nick York. So the next logical step is Joshua Palacios, and I'm with you there. Like Palacios, he's had some fun moments, but is he a guy? Maybe he might be more a jag than anything. And so I would York, I think, plays much more than roster resources putting on with that hit tool in that lineup. So I'm with you there. Like he could be one of those guys later in drafts to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. Nick Gonzalez with a 380 ADP recently, and Nick York with a 444 ADP. Yeah. So. One thing that also jumped out to me looking at this Pirates depth chart is, I know like shortstop dries up in a hurry, but I actually think IKF is like he's just a really safe piece this year for DCs because he's kind of their only shortstop.
Yep. And second base, third, and short eligibility too.
Yeah, like they sort of have to play him at shortstop every day, and he might lead off. So IKF going in the mid to late 300s right now.
Good point.
San Diego, this is team top heavy. Basically, any healthy player on the Padres who's any good at all will play in 2025. So I just didn't think there was that much interesting to discuss. It's just kind of, I guess you could discuss, are guys like Tirso Ornelas or Eggy Rosario good? I would say they're not. I don't think you can look at those guys and say, well, roster research has them playing, so I can draft them. I just think you should assume somebody not on the team is going to be in those spots. And then kind of same thing with the rotation, like after Cease, King, Darvish, it's someone's going to be in the fourth and fifth starter spots, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to care about them in fantasy. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, it's a team that has zero depth right now on the active roster. It's a rough go, to say the least. There's not much to say except stay at the top.
Okay, Bubba, the Giants. Will Hayden Birdsong make the opening day rotation? I didn't think we'd have to have this talk a few months ago, but I think we have to, especially. And I love the Verlander pickup for them. I think that's a lot of teams should have been in on him. Now, I will say, like Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison are in this rotation over Birdsong. I don't think that's necessarily a guarantee. But where are you at on Birdsong?
On paper, before the signing of Verlander, Birdsong would have been in the rotation. I think he still has a humongous impact this season. He should, like I said, Harrison's shoulder, there's no reports yet. Hicks can't go a full season. We know that's well established. Birdsong's going to get plenty of starts in that rotation. Now, does he start out of spring? He should. Will the Giants? Not sure. But I would draft him like a Ryan Nelson. I know we keep going back to that initial. He's going to be that dude that's going to get 20-plus starts by the end of the season. His stuff is probably better than Kyle Harrison's, honestly, when all things are said and done. And the inconsistencies of Jordan Hicks, like long-term health, Birdsong probably finishes better than him by the end of the season. So I like Birdsong a lot. I wouldn't get deterred by the chance of not starting the season in the rotation. He'll have plenty of impacts in the draft champions.
Yeah, this is just a classic draft skills situation to me. I'll take all your discounted Birdsong shares, especially in DCs.
Yep.
And he's another guy where he threw a bunch of innings last year, so I'm not too worried about how they handle him. He might not be in the actual opening day rotation, but I do think he's going to be making starts by mid-April one way or another.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you about their outfielders. So I think there's stuff to like about Gerard Encarnacion, Grant McCray, Luis Matos, and Wade Meckler. Like I don't mind all those guys. The question is, how much do those four guys play? And is there one that you think kind of emerges as closer to an everyday option?
As of now, I think Encarnacion plays a ton at DH and then platoons at first base. I love in a team that's in need of power. He has it. The dude is a freak out there, and he actually can hit for an okay average when he's clicking. So I love the idea of drafting Jerry Encarnacion and maybe getting first base eligibility as the season goes on, because I keep saying it. It's nothing personal about Lamont Wade. He's not the guy for first base. Let's just be real about that. So I like Jarrett a lot at his ADPs. And then I don't have any Meckler, not because I don't want him. I just don't. McRae, if you want a guy with speed and maybe can figure out a swing and miss a bit, I get the appeal. I love taking a chance on Luis Matos. Similar to like your Pajes things. Now, given Pajes did it at the big league level last year more consistently. These guys that have had a couple cups of coffee, we know the skills are there. Matos playing Dominican to get better, has played very well in Winter League. I'm not sure which one. Playing much better down there. The Giants are discussing. They've discussed trading Yaz even before he got his 1-year extension. There's going to be moving parts still as they keep making this team. I think Matos is like your fourth outfielder out the gate that has a bigger impact as the season goes on. So I'd rank it Jarrett, Matos, McRae, Meckler for me. But I think I have little pieces of all of these guys throughout my DCs because I think they will have their moments for sure as the season goes on.
Yeah, I agree with that ranking. And I definitely have Encarnacion. And him and Matos are both kind of going in the 500. So like if you're someone who likes to wait a little bit on outfield or, your backup outfielders, like I love both those guys there. And I love to hear that you think Encarnacion's going to play a lot right out of the gate.
He should.
Potentially grab 1B eligibility. That just makes me feel all better about that.
He should. If they do it right, he should. But again, I've been frustrated with that team for a few years now.
Well, also, Bubba, is this the first time you can remember where you can look at the Giants roster resource page and see 0 platoons?
It's been a while. Gabe Kapler's influence on the team has disappeared, it appears, which is a thing I appreciate because that was our fantasy nightmare every season.
Seattle, another very top-heavy depth chart, and they're presumably not done making moves. Do you have any interest in their cheap, questionable role bench guys, Ryan Bliss, Dominic Canzone, Tyler Locklear, Austin Shenton?
Honestly, not really. To be honest, like they're young. Maybe one of them pops. I couldn't tell you who it's going to be, so I've kind of passed on all of it.
I think Bliss is a viable like fourth second baseman if you're like in the super late rounds and you want to go that route. I also think like Canzone. I think I took Canzone in the 50th round of my last DC. So just we're talking absolutely dirt cheap, but I think Canzone could be strong side platooning for them for stretches this season. So St. Louis. So based off of like the team is basically saying like we really want to trade Nolan Arenado and the trade talks are dead. Like nobody's close to getting a trade done with Arenado. I think a lot of people are waiting on Bregman, and then hopefully the Arenado thing kind of moves along. But as things stand, there really isn't room for Nolan Gorman. I wouldn't draft Nolan Gorman if I thought there was room for him, but just for people that might be interested in Nolan Gorman, do we assume that they move Arenado and they find a spot for him by opening day?
That's what I would assume, but I'm with you also. I'm not drafting him. That swing and miss profile, he's had, unlike other players, he's had time to prove this, and it just hasn't gotten better. So I'm just gonna not worry about that one.
Yeah, it's actually gotten worse.
The opposite of good.
My other question, Michael McGreevy, one of my favorite DC starting pitching targets. Do we think he can make that rotation? Andre Palante and Steven Matz are who roster resources listing as their 4th and 5th starters right now.
I love taking a chance on McGreevy. I was kind of bummed when they didn't let him really get a full run towards the end because they went all Cardinals on us. But I think the skills are great. I think he's better than Palante for sure. I think he's better than Matz, but Matz being the veteran, he'll get his chance. So it'll come down to a battle of Palante versus McGreevy in spring probably. Again, though, McGreevy should get plenty of run throughout the season. Like you said with Birdsong draft skills, not the role right now. McGreevy is a good late round depth piece in pitching.
Right. I mean, McGreevy, like I think he's a different type of guy than like your Bubba Chandler's, your Hayden Birdsongs, but it's nice to have a McGreevy to sort of supplement those guys where you have that lights out stuff and maybe the whip is just okay, but McGreevy, a rare rookie pitcher who actually you can draft for the ratios. Tampa Bay. So another team where roster research doesn't see a ton of
Yes.
platoons, or at least they're not projecting many right now. They just have Jonathan Aranda platooning at DH with Eloy Jimenez, but they're listing Brandon Lau, Josh Lowe, Johnny DeLuca, Christopher Morel, all as like everyday guys at this stage of the offseason. Is there anyone on that team that you are not drafting because you're worried about the playing time?
Honestly, no. Like, if you like these guys, I'm rolling with it. At least not platoon playing time. There's always injury concerns, but Taylor Walls is the guy I'm not interested in. I'll say that much. I think there's other options probably at shortstop. So if you want to pick a person, that would be the one I would just pass on. But it is nice seeing positions opening up where guys might get some favorable run. And that's also because they just don't have the depth they once had in Tampa Bay. But Walls would be the guy I'm just like, nah. I think that's where they have minor league options to maybe change things up.
What do you think about Richie Palacios and Jose Caballero, who they have roster research has as just bench pieces to start the year? Any interest in them, like, playing their way into more playing time?
Caballero got more playing time than I expected last year. He's a big rabbit out there, so I pass on him. But Richie Palacios I do like, and they've proven they put him at second in the outfield and other positions. So he's one of those later round DC targets that I like, 'cause he's just one injury away from having an impact on this team, or maybe someone really, really struggles, you're good to go. But because Brandon Lau deals with back problems all the time. So there's a window where Palacios gets a good bit of playing time. So I do like that quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I like Palacios. You might not be able to use him much early, but I like the 2B outfield eligibility too. So Texas, it seems to me that Evan Carter will basically play against righties if he's healthy and effective, if his back's cooperating. And then if he's not, they just have Leody Taveras there, step in, and Taveras would play against lefties, I would think. I think this is just a very well-sorted roster. I think they've just done a great job of having the right bench pieces to supplement for when Corey Seager and Josh Young eventually miss time. And then my real only question with the Rangers was just, do you think Kumar Rocker makes the opening day rotation?
That's the fun one, because they've paid Eovaldi, they paid DeGrom, they paid Gray, they paid Molly. Like their pitch, those guys should have a spot in the rotation. So it comes down to Cody Bradford versus Kumar, and Bradford I think deserves a spot in the rotation. I'll say that much. So I'm drafting Kumar Rocker as if he is in the rotation. I'm prepared for him to not start the season in the rotation and get a call up at some point, but it's tough to find a spot where he fits in based on how they built their starting rotation. So I'm planning on him being the sixth guy for now, but not for long.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And really, like you mentioned earlier, like if you think a guy is definitely the sixth guy and we're in January, there's a chance that by opening day they're better than the sixth guy, right? So
yeah, and then that's a team full of injury concerns, so he'll get plenty of chances.
Yeah, Toronto. Toronto is in on all these free agents. They just can't get them. Who do you think is going to be Toronto's opening day third baseman? I listed Addison Barger, Ernie Clement, or Elvis Martinez as potential options. Could be someone who's not on the team too.
I want to sidetrack this for a second. You mentioned roster resource and platoons. This is a platoon team, and somehow Will Wagner's hitting cleanup. So this team needs some help. But I do actually like the idea of Ernie Clement starting there. He showed some power, showed some speed, decent batting average, and a pretty good stint of playing time in 2024. So I think you start there. You mentioned Elvis, though. I'm drafting him late. He's second base eligible. I think he might play short and third at times. Like, he's going to get his run. But similar to Noelvi Marte, what do we expect after the steroid situation? Like, how does he bounce back? These kind of things. So I'm drafting it as if Ernie Clement's the guy to start things out. There's a lot of moving pieces in Toronto still, a lot. So time will tell. There's a lot of trades. By midseason, all these guys could be playing every day if things shake out in Toronto the way we think it might.
Yeah, it's like, are they trying to contend, or are they going to rebuild?
They're blowing it up while contending. It's weird.
Yeah, they should probably blow it up. Clement he just seems like such a really good utility infielder, but on this team, he probably does deserve to play every day. Addison Barger, I think there's some signs against right-handed pitching, but even if he did make the team, he would need a platoon partner. And like you said, they've already got a few of those on board. But part of the issue with this depth chart is they've got Dalton Varsho opening there on the IL, but that's not like a season injury. And then, I think we're expecting them to maybe sign like a Anthony Santander still, but who knows? But I think Clement is just a really nice draft champions piece because of the corner and middle eligibility. Washington. All right, Bubba, final team here. Do I have to say rest in peace to my Juan Yepez shares? I think there's at least one DC where he might even be my second first baseman. I don't know, but not ideal. And then I even like the idea of Andres Chaparro super late, and those shares might be even more dead. So any hope for Yepez getting playing time early this year?
Yeah, the fact he's right-handed gives him some hope. I'll say that much. But Josh Bell's obviously a switch hitter. It comes down to what Nathaniel Lowe does, and he doesn't sit often. So yes, I believe that's going to be a little agony throughout this season and until injuries take place. But I liked Yepez too. So early on, it made tons of sense to draft. You didn't see the Nationals being this active in the offseason, but here we are. So yeah, I think Juan Yepez is in trouble. And I'm with you on Chaparro. Like that was one of the fun fab pickups last year. And I don't even know where he would play right now. That is definitely an issue when it comes to Washington.
Right. And Chaparro's UT only currently. So
even worse.
Jacob Young, final question, Bubba. Is he really going to be an everyday center fielder for this team again?
As of right now, it feels like he's going to be the everyday guy because that's like the one area they don't have a ton of depth at. He can run for days, so you hit him at the bottom of the order, flip it over. Because this team, literally from 1 through 7, I like all of them for some kind of fantasy upside. Like it's a very intriguing young fantasy team. So if Young can just get on base, steal a couple bags, he could score a ton of runs. And I guess it comes down, can he play the defense that they need him to play until they maybe get someone else in the outfield? But unless they're newly signed to Med Rosario goes and plays center field, which we've seen him play the outfield before, doubt it's center, but you never know. Just stay away from Luis Garcia, please. Stay away. That's all I ask.
Hey, Jacob Young was worth 2.5 wins last year, despite having a 0.75 ISO.
That's impressive.
I think the defense is there, and it's just a question of how long they want to put up with the close to zero they're getting offensively at the bottom of the order. But I think you might get another 30 steals for you sickos out there drafting Jacob Young.
That's a rough one, but yeah.
Bubba, why don't you let people know where they can keep up with all your great content?
Yeah, just follow me on the social medias at BDintric, and I got the Bubba and the Bloom with Ryan Bloomfield's kind of the go-to these days, and my Bench with Bubba podcast as well, and then a ton of other stuff. So just follow me out there, and you'll see it. Always got something coming your way.
30 teams in 80 minutes, Bubba. Couldn't have done it without you. Really appreciate you taking the time, man. And hope you enjoy the rest of your offseason.
You as well, my friend.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Be back next week with another special episode, and the Prospect Top 400 will be updated a week from today.